Oh hi, it's your old buddy Zoo, and today we have the TrimUI Brick, sent to us by our buddies at Go Game Geek. Thanks, Go Game Geek! The Brick here is an extremely pocketable, extremely premium feeling budget mini Game Boy. We always love mini Game Boys, tiny Game Boys. Our old buddy Ban already did an unboxing video for the channel, so get yourself situated for a classic Zoo deep dive. My former BFF, Russell Decor, always tells people to settle in and get a drink, but you're an adult, probably. I'm not going to demand that you do something like that. Get dehydrated if you want. I could care less. So here we are with the TrimUI Brick. It's actually a pretty cool looking handheld, and it feels premium. Part of what makes it feel premium is this metal backplate. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but it just, I don't know if that's aluminum, CNC aluminum. It just feels nice. The handheld itself feels like it's just built well. It has a premium feel to the plastic. It feels sturdy. I've been using it for about a week, 2 weeks. Haven't had any issues. It just feels really well built. It also has some pretty cool RGB lighting. There's an RGB strip on top. There's RGB under the shoulder buttons if you're into that. And you have these two buttons. They look like start and select, but they're not. They're function 1 and function 2. You actually, with this little toggle switch down there, you have 3 hotkeys you can map. And they're actually mappable and readable in RetroArch, which some handhelds, you have a hotkey, it just doesn't really do anything and it gets frustrating. But these are all recognized by RetroArch. So if you want this to be your fast forward instead of R2, then you can do that if you want. The D-pad, it's actually a pretty solid D-pad. The face buttons are good too. You have pretty good triggers. They're raised in the back, and mine actually ship with some different ones. I'm going to go over that in a minute. But it's just all around good feel. The buttons are responsive. The D-pad feels tight. You have more than enough buttons, honestly. You have a menu button. You have these 2 functions. You have your side stuff. You have your volume on the side. Heck, let's do the tour. You have your RGB on top, volume on the side. On the bottom, you have an SD card. You have a reset button, which is recessed. I like that. It's hard to press unless you really want to. USB input on the bottom for power, headphone jack on the bottom, I like that. And on the side here, you have your toggle switch, which is mappable. By default, when you turn it on, it gives you power mode. Honestly, I haven't really seen a difference between power mode and non-power mode, so maybe it's me. And then on the back here, metal plate, which is nice, minimal branding, and you have your battery information. Only can use certified charger. The battery may explode in the fire. Oh, we don't want that. One of the cool things about this handheld is that it comes with a bunch of replacement shoulder buttons. Now they sent me what, 5? I think a normal retail unit comes with 3, but some of them are translucent. And you see that there's that RGB on the back. If you slap that in there, then the RGB is much more pronounced because it's coming through this translucent. And they're not all straight copies of each other. So you have this one, which is relatively flat. They're all the same height. You have the default where this is raised a little bit. And then if you wanted to go all out, you have these ones where R2 has a much higher max peak than R and L2 with L. It's just customization options. I actually prefer stock, but customization options, if you're not feeling the back button, you don't have to go buy third-party better buttons from someone on Etsy. You have them, and I think that's actually pretty cool. And that's something you don't really see a lot. They're just encouraging you to mod it yourself right out the bat. I don't know if I want to spend a lot of time changing out the buttons because honestly, these ones work for me. I might do a short later to show how you can do that. Now I mentioned that some of these are translucent so you see the light, but the RGB is relatively customizable in the settings. So you go into settings and then to display, and you can change your screen brightness. I'm going to put that at 10 for the video. You can turn your LEDs on or off, but you can also increase the brightness of this top one specifically. Turn that real low or off. That's super low. Tail lights, which are under here, we're going to have those real bright. And then these F1 and F2, we can make them super bright too. You can also have the LED policy follow the theme. So you can have by default, these are your settings. You set up a theme with certain colors and stuff, it's going to follow that. Change your lock screen time. You can do your contrast. Whoa, really blow it out. So there's, on this really, really good screen, which we haven't even talked about yet, you can mess with your temperature, your saturation, contrast, exposure, all sorts of settings like that, and you can really get yourself situated. Let's turn these all down to 3, just so it's not really blowing out the camera and distracting from the screen. And then the brightness, it gets really, really dim at 0 out of 10. That, coupled with the fact that these buttons aren't super loud. This could be a pretty sneaky bedroom, kind of dark, quiet room handheld. The only issue is you'd have to definitely turn off these LEDs. Another cool thing is you don't have to dig through a bunch of settings to turn off these LEDs if you don't want to, because you can go to key setting and you can set, give it a second, you could set F1 to turn the LED on or off. You can also make this toggle switch turn the LED off and on. I haven't seen much of a difference in performance mode with non-performance mode, so I'm just going to deactivate that, and I'm going to turn LED off and as this setting. So we're going to back out, save. It made a little buzz. It's saving, and so now you see LEDs on, LEDs off, LEDs on, LEDs off. Now, one of the reasons I set this to LED on and off is that from the start menu, you got to go all the way over to settings. You got to go to display. You got to go down here, turn it on or off. That's a lot of extra clicks just to turn the LEDs off. Takes a lot of clicks is going to be a recurring theme with this stock operating system. So, I don't know. Keep count of how many times I say it and let me know in the comments. Let's do some quick comparisons here. We're going to have the TrimUI next to the original Miyoo Mini and the Miyoo Mini Plus. It's definitely bigger than the original Miyoo Mini, but it's a little bit skinnier than the Miyoo Mini Plus. But otherwise, relatively similar. It's in that tiny Game Boy category. Again, comparing it to the 35XX, which I'm going to do a lot during this video because in a lot of ways, it's a modern 35XX or 35XX Plus. It is a little smaller, it's a little less wide, it's a little shorter, but relatively similar sized. Sticking with Anbernic, we have the 35XXSP, which is like my sneaky favorite pocketable handheld. And you can see when it's folded, it's a lot shorter. When it's expanded, it's a lot bigger, but still kind of in that similar size range. Let's move on to Powkiddy. You got the Powkiddy V10, the ultimate Game Boy Advance on a budget machine. And you can see it's definitely a lot smaller, but the V10 does have that 3x2 screen, which is ideally suited for Game Boy Advance. Rounding out, you have the GameKitty Pixel. I never got a case for it. I just used the box it came in. Definitely a lot bigger than the GameKitty Pixel. And then comparing it with Corpo stuff, we have the Game Boy Pocket here, and you can see it's about the same width. It's a little bit shorter. And one of the things I didn't mention yet is that TrimUI has resisted the urge to have that little specific Game Boy curve that like the 35XX has. I don't know though, I kind of like the Game Boy curve. Now I've been using the 35XX and then the 35XX Plus, and then of course the 35XXSP for a long time, 2 years now. So maybe I'm just used to this form factor and this size of screen, but the TrimUI Brick feels just really ergonomic and comfortable to me. The overall ergonomics are solid. I mean, you're getting diminishing returns if you're going to play it for a long time, but you know, for half hour of gameplay, the ergonomics are really solid. It honestly feels just like a premium XX. Now, I wouldn't play this for 5 hours in a row if I didn't have any other options, but my use case for this sort of pocketable device is a half hour or so in a waiting room. Like when I was at the doctor earlier, I pulled this out and played for 15 minutes. Or, you know, you're sitting in the hallway at dance class, or you're at gymnastics for your kids or whatever. And in cases like that, it's perfect because it's pocketable, it's powerful, and it's got a really nice form factor. Since this is so similar in size to all these other mini Game Boys, you're in prime one-handed RPG territory. With stock OS, you can do Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance with fast forward already set up for you. It's mapped to R2 behind your finger here. For SNES, Genesis, PlayStation 1, and other games, you're going to have to go in and fiddle with the shortcuts for fast forward. A lot of the buzz with the 35XX and the Miyoo Mini and then the Miyoo Mini Plus was based around, you know, just palming the entire handheld like this. And you're not playing crazy platformers or action games. You're playing role-playing games. And you have enough room to get your hand on the entire controller. I'm going to walk down here with my buddy Locke, and you can see how you could just kind of hang out and do this for a while. I know a lot of us are dads, and I want to let you know, and not a lot of people know this, but it is against the law for your wife to yell at you for playing video games if you have a sleeping baby on your shoulder or lap. Now, non-parents out there are looking at me like I'm nuts, but getting those naps in on schedule is extremely important. So get snugged up nice and warm, be sure you have your dominant hand free to play your games, and you got some quality parenting time while simultaneously grinding on metal slimes or trying to find shiny Pokemons. Pretty slick. Another huge thing about this handheld is the screen. This is a 1024 by 768 3.2 inch IPS screen. It's actually the same panel that's in the RGB 20 Pro. On the RGB 20 Pro, the screen seemed weirdly out of scale because the handheld was so long. On the Brick, however, it fits the entire aesthetic very, very well. It's ideally suited for the overall size of this device, and it's pixel dense. You're going to be able to tweak a lot with 16-bit and below. You can go nuts with shaders because you got the power to run them. You're also going to have some good options still on 32-bit stuff like PlayStation. The only exception with this is the OS. It's doable, but it's kind of a pain in the butt to do on stock. We're going to get to that later. The TrimUI Brick uses the same guts as the TrimUI Smart Pro, hello, with an Allwinner A133P+, 1GB of RAM, and a PowerVR GE8300 GPU, huh? It's also got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you don't have to worry about missing out on achievements, and it opens the possibility for remote file transfers with a couple custom firmwares that are in development. It has a 3000 mAh battery, and I was kind of worried about that with this high-density screen, but honestly, it really surprised me with battery life. I played for an hour and a half, including some N64 and some PSP, and I only lost like 15% battery. You've also got a couple of auto screen lock settings, which helps save power as well. And I would recommend going into the menu and turning it off, but if you accidentally press the power button and put it in sleep mode, like I did for a day and a half, it still had battery when I turned it back on, which kind of impressive. I will say, turning it off, again, requires going into a couple sub-nested menus. Too many clicks just to get to a simple shut it down. Like on the H700 line for Anbernic, their stock OS, you just kind of press the button for menu and it says, you want to shut down? That's one of the options. It's there. It's like the people developing the stock operating system for the new Anbernic line, at least, have actually like played games and used it. I don't know. Since this shares the same SoC as the TrimUI Smart Pro, you're going to get similar performance. What that means is you're going to top out at some Dreamcast, some N64, some PSP, but everything below should run fine. It's actually kind of similar, in my experience at least, to the performance you get from the XX line with the H700 chip. And that's kind of ironic to me because, again, this handheld feels like a premium 35XX. It also shares a lot of similarities with the original 35XX in that the stock experience is crap. Mine came fully in Chinese, and I had to use the Google Translate app and take pictures of it just to find a setting that changes to English. And honestly, stock OS didn't get much better from there. Just like how the 35XX didn't really take off until Garlic, or the Miyoo Mini was kind of a turd until you got Onion, or even how the TrimUI Smart Pro was kind of ugh until Tomato OS and then CrossMix OS. This thing is really held back by the stock operating system. Like, you can get to where you need to be, right? And there are a lot of settings buried under this simple settings menu here if you go to advanced menu, but it's just a lot more work than it really needs to be. And it's in a bad spot too because it's too confusing for a brand new user, I think, and it's too confining for someone who already has experience with other devices. Stock OS on this, it seems like it's mismatched across the board. Too complicated for new users, not good enough for experienced users. It's just kind of a mess. Stock OS does do kind of an admirable job of giving some options for different emulators. Like for N64, you press X, and you can swap which core you want to use, from either Mupen 64 Plus or Parallel N64. However, both of these emulators aren't really optimized. I know Cruis'n USA is hard to run, and it's not going to work on here. I'm going to tell you that right now. But if you get into the RetroArch settings, and you go to Core Options, you can see it's set to be 640 by 480. And maybe I want to scale it down. No, that's as low as it goes. Well, Zoo, maybe that's just Mupen 64 Plus. So let's close out of here, and we're going to open it up with Parallel N64. Same thing. Go to that Predator button down there, Advanced menu. You're in the RetroArch. You can get to it. It's not like irrevocably buried in there, but it is kind of buried. Go to Core Options, and we are set to 640 by 480. Okay. Take it down to 320 by 240, but you have to restart it. We're going to restart. Takes you back to the main menu. None of your stuff was saved. So if you do want to go in there, you got to back all the way out, go to Apps, go to RetroArch, find that game you just played, run it. Now you press the Predator menu again. Still in that weird, overlay menu. Go to Advanced, go down to Core Options, and let's set this to 320 by 240. So then you have to go back out. You have to save the configuration file. You can't save the configuration file when you open up a game. You can only save it when you open up RetroArch directly. So now we're going to restart. Okay, now we're going to open the game again. Make sure we are in parallel N64. Run it. Is it going to run now? It's still going to run like crap. Maybe the settings didn't carry over. So we'll go to Advanced menu. We're going to go down to Core Options. No, we're at 320 by 240. It's just too much for this emulator to handle. But again, even if maybe somehow I could get this to run at 320, all those steps I had to go through to get here, ugh. And then on top of that, there's much more behind the scenes optimization that custom firmware will be able to do. It's just an unsteady N64 performance. And that carries over, not as badly, but it does carry over to Dreamcast and PSP. And then for PSP, on this 4x3 screen, you really want to play PSP on a 3-inch 4x3 screen? Maybe, if that's your only option, but I wouldn't. I guess the good thing, at least for beginners, is that you do have this Predator button, and this basic menu actually isn't too bad. You can do saves, you can load, that's about it. But a super simplified, easy to use menu is also something that is featured in a lot of custom firmwares, and I think done a lot better than this, because you do have that advanced menu, you have to go fiddle with it. And then another issue I have with stock, again, the nesting of everything behind all these different menus. GameBoy, right? Load it up, it runs fine. It looks beautiful on this high-def screen. But say I want to do different colors. Now on a lot of handhelds and a lot of custom firmware, you press the shoulder buttons and you'd have all these different colors. But on here, you got to go to Menu button, got to go to Advanced menu, got to go to Core Options. You got to say, I want to use, custom internal, and then let's do, oh heck, we'll do one of them random, I don't know, just a completely random one, Scooby-Doo. And then you got it. But that's not going to save unless you open up Game Boy and RetroArch, make these changes, maybe do a hotkey to have R1 or L1 change it. And you're not using R1 and L1 for Game Boy games. And it's just, a lot of these other custom firmwares, people who play games, who enjoy games, and there's just, it's set up for you. And if you are using this as an experienced user, it's not the end of the world, but if you're going to get this for someone as a gift, even though it has that simplified menu, there's a lot of simple things, in my opinion, that are just kind of obscured. Now we done it. Can I please get a straight piece? Oh, I'm screwed. I'm boned. You. Another complaint about stock is that this thing could have been a really cool Game Boy Advance 2.0 machine. If you haven't watched my videos before, Game Boy Advance 2.0 games are basically DS games that don't really use the second screen, or they don't use the stylus, or if they do use the second screen, it's for a map or something. Those Game Boy Advance 2.0 games are sneaky good on these smaller handhelds, but once again, it's held back by a weirdly implemented drastic build. So you see, instead of just saying, let's do one screen and you can swap them, they have this weird side screen over here. And so your hotkeys, you can make it a little bit bigger. That's it. And if you really wanted to, you go in the menu, you could reconfigure all your hotkeys, reconfigure what the default screen is, all that stuff. So if you're going to buy this and you're going to use stock, it's doable. It's just, again, too many clicks for something that could have been optimized for you from the get-go. Like, the people building this operating system for this handheld, they should have realized this screen isn't going to work for this configuration. Honestly, part of me wonders if they just used the firmware from this and didn't change it at all, which would, I don't know, it's kind of a bummer, kind of a lazy cop-out, but stock OS, not great. Stock OS also comes with ports. I'm not 100% sure if this is Portmaster with the TrimUI skin over it or what. It comes with games, and I know some people have complained about that in the past with other manufacturers. We got two Celeste, we got classic and regular. You got that card game everyone loves, Balatro. You got Diablo Hellfire, Sonic Mania, and Stardew Valley. I'm not going to show a lot of footage beyond Stardew Valley because I have owned Stardew Valley for, I don't know, when did it come out? I bought it right when it came out. I've had it for a long time, but I am 99% sure that all of this stuff is wares. Remember wares with a Z at the end instead of an S? You knew you were a badass when you replaced the S with a Z. You can see here on lovely Zoo Farms. Oh, look, it opened in Chinese. Why? It was in English the last time I played it. Let's get Google Translate out. Wait a minute. I'm not quite sure what happened because this worked last time. But we're gonna do this live. We're gonna get Google Translate. We're gonna do Chinese. Okay. We getting that? Well, this is a mess. I mean, look, I made it. I had a game started. The full stock experience. Let's see if I can get to a menu here. I know there's the settings in here. Honest to God. Let's wait a minute. Come on, wake up. Let's see here. Settings. Oh, get the dang translator app out again. What's that say? Fish bite sound. That doesn't help. Ah, crap. Well, that's a fine kettle of fish. No, I don't want to go back to bed. We're doing it live. What's here? What's this? Huh? Huh? What's this? Oh, look. Seeds. I will say, if you can figure out how to get it turned off from Chinese, which I did as recently as yesterday. I don't know what happened, but it does play in English if you fiddle with the settings, and it looks beautiful on here. One of the issues, if you're playing a lot of text-heavy games, or if it's in Chinese, it might be a little bit hard to read on the screen because the text is very small. But I tell you what, if you want games in English, or if you're into that whole ethics thing, you're probably going to want to add your own games instead of these dubious ones they ship, and I don't even know how to do that. With custom firmware, it'll be easy through Portmaster. I'm not sure how you would do that on stock. Boy, that's kind of a kick in the butt. Why is it in Chinese? How do you get out of here? I guess speaking of ports, I want to remind you this thing is portable as all get out. Huh? You like that? Since it is roughly the same size as the 35XX, I'm at the point where I'm actually using the case I bought from Amazon for my 35XX. And even with all the extra packaging and crap in there, it still fits. I got room for headphones, SD card, all that jazz. In real life terms, the handheld, including the case, will fit into the inside pocket of a standard dad jacket. Pants pockets, with the case at least, might be a figurative and literal stretch, but it's very pocketable in any situation without the case. I've used the 35XX and the 35XX Plus as my dedicated lobby handheld, so the Brick is a natural successor. It doesn't stand alone as the most portable handheld ever, obviously, and there are certainly cheaper ways to play PlayStation and below on a smaller handheld like this, but the size really does lend itself to pocketability. And this screen, this beautiful high-def screen on such a pocketable device, it's new and unique. Another kind of new and unique thing is this metal back panel. But while it looks cool as hell, after playing for a while, it starts to get literally hot as hell. Like if you're playing Dreamcast or N64 or something, the metal plate starts to get uncomfortably hot. It gets uncomfortable to hold. I would wager if we took these screws out, you'd find the CPU right against it, which, from an engineering design standpoint, this giant hunk of aluminum is probably a really efficient heatsink. But your index fingers are always touching it. And then when it gets real hot, it feels like you're the heatsink. Don't like that. I guess if you wanted to burn off your fingerprints like you were going to rob a bank, you could play Crazy Taxi for like 5 hours and then just slowly sizzle them off. So if that is your use case, good. One note about this switch over here. I went into the settings and I made absolutely sure it was mapped to the power mode setting. And I didn't see a big jump when it was on versus off. Like, I tried to see if maybe I would get a 5 FPS jump or a 10 FPS jump in N64 or something like that. But it didn't really seem to make a noticeable difference. I like the idea of this switch. I like that if I'm going to play Game Boy Advance or Super Nintendo all day, I can turn power mode off and I'm going to be sipping battery. And if, hey, let's play some N64 for a minute, turn that power mode back on, really, performance. It just doesn't work for me, which is why I set it to turn my RGB lighting off and on. See? Zoom, zoom, zoom. It also buzzes when you do that, so this is Rumble compatible if that's your jam. Finally, let's talk about price. Now, Go Game Geek has this for $80 in the US, but you can drop it down to around $68 when you use code RH15 to take 15% off, which, I think, that's the price to beat right now. You might find it cheaper on a stray AliExpress store. And you might also get a box with some tissues and a light bulb in it instead of the TrimUI Brick. So it's up to you. If you want to save $8 and play the risky shipment lottery, that's fine. But your mileage may vary if you're not going to get it from a reputable store like GoGameGeek or any of the other third-party resellers. Well, Gary, it's time for What Did We Learn? And we learned that the TrimUI Brick is the latest in a long line of mini Game Boys. Look at all of them. But this one is a lot more premium than the rest. It comes in at a higher price tag, especially coming down from some of those November AliExpress sales we just had. But $70-ish from GoGameGeek, if you're going to use that RH15 code, that's still not bad, especially since there is a lot to like here. On my unit at least, the overall build quality was high. The device feels premium, the buttons were all responsive and good, and I had a really fun time playing games on it. It might, honestly, be my new coat pocket handheld for the winter season, and that's really why you would want something like this. As a pocketable mini Game Boy for short gaming sessions while you're waiting somewhere, or you got 5 minutes to kill. It's not all good though, because the stock operating system is MinUI and CrossMix are in various stages of testing, and I think I saw a test build of newly booting, so there are at least 3 options right there. I know some companies are shipping these bundled with a CrossMix card that's already full of ROMs for a much higher price, and going that way is a personal option depending on your familiarity with flashing firmware and with getting games. I'd personally just get it without an SD card, and then I would spend a few bucks buying my own name brand SD card, like 64 gigabytes will be fine for this, and then you flash the firmware that you like the best. This thing is begging for a killer custom firmware though. I feel like it really has the potential to be the next Miyoo Mini or the 35XX. It just needs, onion or garlic, or I don't know what they're going to call this one. We're running out of stuff. Heck, we're going to call it Pickle OS. If you're going to make an OS for it, call it Pickle OS, please. I will do so many reviews on Pickle OS if you make it, devs. Listen to your friend Zoo. I'm the only one you can trust. Stock isn't the absolute worst, but honestly, and it feels really weird to say this, but freaking Anbernic has set a new bar with stock OS during the past year with all of their XX models they're pushing out. And for me at least, my tolerance for these inferior stock experiences has gotten a lot lower. I know TrimUI OS is usable, but the last few versions of the XX firmware, they're good enough that I can hand a handheld to someone, don't even take it out of the box to turn it on. I just hand it to them, and they can figure it out with a really high degree of clarity and certainty without any help from me. Stay tuned, by the way, for a video on that subject. With this handheld, you are going to max out at some N64, some Dreamcast, and some PSP. But it's not really the end of the world because you don't have an analog stick. You can map the D-pad to analog mode with one of the 3 hotkeys you have, but it's all just a whole mess of compromises all piled on each other at that point. You're using a jerry-rigged control setup on a chip that's not going to give you 100%, and you're also viewing these games, especially the PSP games, on a 3.2-inch 4x3 screen, and it's not ideal. What is ideal, however, are classic 32, 16, and 8-bit games. 4x3, naturally, is going to look amazing on this 4x3 screen. But even 1-to-1 stuff, or 3x2 stuff like Game Boy Advance really don't lose a ton of real estate. And since the pixel density is so high compared to the overall screen size, everything just looks really, really crisp. I mean, look at that. Beautiful. Would I buy this on my own, even though I already have like 4 other handhelds that fill the same exact niche? Yes. But that's because I'm mentally unwell and I have hoarder tendencies. Should you get this if you already have something similar? Well, yes and no, and maybe also wait. Yes, because the screen is amazing, the feel is super premium, and it's a really all-around solid handheld. No, because you're just going to play the same games you already play on your other stuff, and your other stuff probably has mature custom firmware that outperforms the TrimUI stock. So save the $70 towards a real showstopper. Save it for an RP5 or something like that. And then maybe, because maybe this thing gets custom firmware this week or next week, and it just becomes the next hot thing. Who knows? I don't. But what I do know is that I like it for what it is now, and I really like it for what it might become. This has potential to be the Miyoo Mini or the 35XX of 2025 going forward. Hey, if you like this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe and all that jazz. We're still grinding away towards 100,000K, and I want to get a dumb silver button to hang in my living room next to family photos. My wife would hate it. My wife would hate it. So, if you want to sow domestic discord in my household, remember to subscribe and tell other people to subscribe. Maybe, if we get to 100K, I'll live stream that first counseling session. Won't that be fun? I'm sure it will. Anyway, we'll see you later. Goodbye.